All right, good morning. We are this week and next week in this series, Finding God in the Ordinary, sort of walking through an ordinary day, taking some of the moments that happen with some regularity and sort of exploring what those moments teach us about encountering God. So we've got today and next Sunday, and then the following Sunday, the next Sunday after that, we'll spend time in, I think it's Psalm 107. It's one of the Psalms that really digs into thanking God. So be appropriate, sort of lean in towards Thanksgiving week. And then we'll begin a new series for Advent coming out of Isaiah 9. He shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace, all those titles that are attached to the coming Messiah. And we'll do sort of an overview of that, and then we'll spend each Sunday during Advent exploring one of those titles for Christ and what that tells us about who he is and what his coming is all about. So, and that'll finish up the year. So that's where we are headed. Today we're taking up the chapter title is Drinking Tea, and it stands for,
which I am doing.
Oh, look at that! Very good. Yeah.
At 10 o'clock.
If you watch Ted Lasso, there are all kinds of bad things that are said about tea. I happen to like tea, but not everybody does. So drinking tea here stands for those little things that we do in the course of a day that bring us some amount of pleasure. Something we savor, something that we look forward to, something that is just that moment, during the day. So for her, it's drinking tea. So here's how she opens this chapter. So she's talking about going here and there during the day. And then for the time being, I'm ignoring the socks and the toys and socks strewn across my living room to sit on my couch and drink tea. I pause to notice and to savor the dark tea rippling against the bright white of my favorite mug, the twisted branches of late winter trees outside the window, the warmth of the steam against my face, the dwindling light stretched in long rectangles across the floor. So we sort of, get a slow-mo picture here, just maybe a still frame of that moment of drinking tea and all the sights and sounds and experiences that are pleasurable that are coming from that moment. Okay. So let me ask you, what during the course of an ordinary day, what's sort of an ordinary thing that happens with regularity that is a source of joy for you? That is your tea. If it's tea, that's great. Rosemary?
It's the New York Times mini crossword.
Oh, okay.
And I cannot start my day until I've solved it.
Yeah. And what kind of joy comes out of that? Why is that enjoyable for you?
I don't know, wakes up my brain. It's done alone. It's done in the dark. And it's just coincidentally, it typically falls at the exact same time frame. Randomly, in my morning routine of meditation and reading. Then I look at the clock and it's time for the crossword minute.
Very good. So it's part of that routine, wakes your brain up. Good way to start the day. Yeah. Someone else. What's an ordinary joy during a typical day?
I reach for my iPad about 5 a.m. and I post pictures for the day. Social distancing expression. I can tell you're also a morning person.
And so tell us about that. What joy do you get out of doing that?
I'm a really visual person. I just love details and colors and shadows and patterns. And I'd like to share them.
Okay. Anyone else? Just an ordinary joy. Claudia?
My second cup of coffee, I sit on the couch and my cat sits on my lap every morning. And I sit, I drink my coffee and and we have a little sweet time.
Yeah,
And when I skip it, he gets angry.
is that right?
Called
So-
my cat meditation.
Yeah, that's nice. Scott,
This is gonna sound very strange, but I get a lot of enjoyment out of taking the dog out to the bathroom. And I didn't think I would, because the girls promised that they would do that job, but it's my job.
Yeah.
And early in the morning, late in the evening, we're out there waiting for him to go, and while I'm waiting, I'm looking at what's changing,
Hmm,
the woods and the sky.
yeah,
Sometimes I look back at the house and I can see someone walking around inside.
hmm,
It just, it's an enforced pause
mhm,
that I really enjoy.
nice, yeah, yeah, not distracted by anything else, nothing else to do. And so you can be present. in the moment there. That's good. Robert?
I like to sit by the ocean, down a special place in the house
Oh,
called St. Mary's by the Sea. And it's nice to see the sun come up over the water.
I bet.
See the ripples in the water too.
hmm,
Yeah.
very nice, yeah, yeah. David?
I'm a fairly sports oriented kind of guy. So there's a variety of sports that I do depending on the day of the week that really helps me sort of get into the day. Whether it's something that's high intensity or something more relaxing, or something that's solo, others.
Good, okay. Okay, so let's do some thinking together about these moments and about the seeking of joy, okay? So this, Trish Harrison Warren writes, after God finishes each creative work in Genesis 1, he declares his creation good and lavishly gives us free rein to enjoy its goodness. It's no accident that the psalmist enjoins us to taste and see that the Lord is good. Not simply to reason or confess that God is good, but to taste it. My body, this tea, and the quiet twilight are teaching me God's goodness through my senses. I'm tasting, hearing, feeling, seeing, and smelling that God is good. Pleasure is our deep human response to an encounter with beauty and goodness. In these moments of pleasure, of delight, enjoyment, awe, and revelry, we respond to God impulsively with our very bodies. Yes, we agree. Your creation is very good. When we enjoy God's creation, we reflect God himself. God does not stoically pronounce creation good like a disinterested manager checking off a quality checklist so he can clock out early. God delights in the perfect acoustics of ocean waves, swoons over the subtle intensity of dark chocolate, and glories in robin's eggs and peacock calls. What do you think you learn about God's goodness through these ordinary moments of pleasure and joy? Julie?
Just in a sense, God's purpose for our lives is, especially creation, just that's the point of all these things, when it's nothing but beauty. And it's not for the creator, actually, and it's just showing you more, it's more evidence of God's love for us.
Yeah, so there are things like the turning of leaves that surely could have been done differently, more practically. They all fall off on the 31st of October. But the way that it happens is so beautiful, and so God, we look at that and say, well, God's a great creator.
I think that what comes to my mind is that God endures forever. And all day long, I'm so busy, I miss it. But when I pause or walk a dog and have a moment, the beauty is always there in that pause. And it's kind of amazing that the beauty, that's timed with your internal clock, because it's there always.
Nice. Yeah. So God endures for plenty.
I mean, it's simplicity.
Hmm.
You know, you run around trying to, whatever your goals are and everything, but yet the simple act of petting the cat
Mhm.
and reflecting while you're doing it and in the quiet, it's just simplicity makes you happy. So why are you chasing all this other stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. Very grounding and centering.
Be still and know I'm God.
That's right. Yeah. Just the act of being still. Let me continue. She writes, mysteriously and wondrously, God revels even more than we do in the slight bitterness of tea, feel sunshine on skin, a ripe avocado, a perfect guitar lick, or a good plot twist. In the Screwtape letters, the senior demon, Screwtape, scolds his underling for allowing his patient the smallest experience of pleasure, a walk in a beautiful place, tea, or a good book which he read because he enjoyed it and not in order to make clever remarks about it to his friends. Both pleasure and pain, says Screwtape, are unmistakably real, and therefore they give the man who feels them a touchstone of reality. He diabolically warns that people should not be allowed to maintain any personal taste, even if it is something quite trivial, such as a fondness for country cricket, or collecting stamps, or drinking cocoa. Though small practices of enjoyment may seem trivial, the demon sees in them a sort of innocence and humility and self-forgetfulness. But a few words here from Tim Shorey, an article back in, was somebody saying something? Okay. In an article back in 2020, July of this year, called The Biblical Theology of Pleasure. God could have made all nutritious food taste like sawdust. I think a lot of it does. And given us an irresistible urge to eat it anyway. And while some allegedly nutritious food does taste like sawdust, the truth is most of it tastes good, at least to some people. While nutritious mud burgers and healthy sawdust salads devoured by an irresistible survival instinct could have been our daily fare, they are not. This says something about the wonderful about the one who made us. God invented taste buds and 10 million different flavors to go with them. Incredible pleasure of taste bears witness both that God is and that he is good. And that really is remarkable. I mean, just you think about the things that we eat throughout the day and how pleasurable they are and how God has created us to notice that, to love it, to savor it, to desire it, to find joy in it. Shorey goes on to say, a faithful life requires a robust theology of pleasure to accompany a realistic theology of suffering and sacrifice. I think there's some real wisdom here. We, the church, we've done a lot of thinking about suffering and a lot of thinking about sacrifice, and both of those have their well-known places in our broader theology and spiritual growth. But we've done relatively little around theology of pleasure and the role that joy and pleasure has in the spiritual life. Those who serve well and suffer much need to know God created pleasure and wants them to enjoy it. Adjunct Fernando, no stranger to sorrow, makes this stunning claim. God has made us with a capacity for ecstasy, and he expects us to use it. We should join the psalmist's praise. You, Lord, cause the grass to grow for the livestock and plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth food from the earth and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen a man's heart. C.S. Lewis is spot on when he says it is a Christian duty for a person to be as happy as he can. I wonder if Lewis was echoing Charles Simeon. There are but two lessons for Christians to learn. The one is to enjoy God in everything. The other is to enjoy everything in God. And then coming back to Warren, our culture's relationship with pleasure is complex. On one hand, we seem obsessed with pleasure. We overindulge and overeat. We're addicted to amusement and overwhelmed by pornography, sexual gratuity, and violence, both on screens and off. Ironically, greed and consumerism dull our delight. The more we indulge, the less pleasure we find. We are hedonistic cynics and gluttonous stoics. In our consumerist society, we spend endless energy and money seeking pleasure, but we are never sated. So let's talk about that. What do you see as the difference between hedonism, just spending all of life seeking out pleasure, pleasure for the sake of pleasure, pleasure for the sake of self-satisfaction, and true enjoyment, true satisfaction, the kinds of things that we've been talking about so far this morning? What's, in your mind, what's the difference between those two?
I think temperance is a good word here.
Okay, do you want to say some more about that? What is temperance to you?
Temperance is not overindulging, moderation.
Okay, so there are limits, there are margins, there's boundaries that we respect, and within those we find joy in the life. Okay, good. What else?
I think it's when you were reading that, something, the last page, something popped into my head, just like medically, if you have a medicine that you need to take, but then if you like a side effect or something, and after a while, it doesn't happen anymore, so you take more, and then you end up taking more and more and more, and then you can't stop. That's kind of what it strikes me about hedonism. Something was fun, something was great, and then it's not. So you think that more of it will bring back that feeling, but it just doesn't work. And nothing is special because everything is everything. I think if you just need to stop. Well, I also think that people who don't have God in their lives are missing something that they can't get from any other thing on earth for themselves. So that if you stop with all the stuff or whatever it is, sex or drugs or doing something else, performing or working 90 hours a week, to stop and figure out yourself and what you're really searching for is probably not any of that stuff. And then just get back to what is ordinary? If you can't take pleasure in that, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I feel like I'm talking in circles.
One of the things I hear you saying is that there can be almost an addictive quality to some of these things when they're experienced and enjoyed outside of God. And so it takes more and more of that same experience to produce that feeling of pleasure. And in my mind, it goes back to that quote,
Yes.
Enjoy God in everything,
Yeah,
and enjoy everything in God.
Yeah.
That seems to be a key there. I saw Scott's hand up.
I think it's all in how you view pain and scarcity. And let me explain that. The hedonistic view is to avoid pain and scarcity at all costs, which means that you're going to do everything you can to maintain this sense of pleasure that you have, because you do not want pain or scarcity.
Yeah.
I think there is no enjoying anything that is not periodically scarce. And when you think about it, I mean, the stunning beauty of the 45 days of fall or the 2 months of fall, if that was less scarce, would we really enjoy it as much? So, and the same thing about food. If you were forced to eat amazing food constantly all day long, you would not enjoy it. So it's how you view, and if we're realistic with ourselves, pain and scarcity are a part of every single person's life. And we need to get used to it. No, I shouldn't say we should get used to it. We should accept it. We should accept it and celebrate it when it's not there.
Good insight. Jane and then Laconia.
Your last comment, Chris, the quote that you read right before we moved into this discussion, being aware of the presence of God in all good things. and being aware that all good things are gifts of God, as the old hymn says. For me, that really is kind of the central difference between hedonism and the joy of the Lord. It's not a matter, well, I won't quibble with, I mean, I do think, I have learned only to eat tomatoes in August and September and perhaps early October. Just eat them when they're good and leave them alone when they're not. And so I do think, some of the other things that we've talked about play a role and contribute, but for me, the central issue is finding and being aware that all good gifts come from God, and God is present in every good gift that we enjoy, whatever it is.
Thank you, Jane. Laconia?
Yeah, I think I'm challenged by people who don't believe in God, but live authentic lives that I believe the way God would want them to. Versus people who claim to believe in God and live tremendously hedonistic lives.
Yeah. Okay. Julie?
I was gonna say one thing too about diminishing returns, you eat one cookie and it's satisfying, but then you tend to want to do another, and there's this sense that it is not as satisfying. Everyone you add. And, so I think it's, just some wisdom to recognize that, there's diminishing returns. So the things that you enjoy will satisfy you, not if you overindulge, you're just not very satisfied. To the same extent.
Yeah, so there's something to be said for savoring, just really savoring that whatever it is that you're enjoying in that moment. Robert and then Anna.
Yeah, on the word hedonism, when I think of that word, and I think of, in life, just the pursuit of, the constant pursuit of pleasure, whether it be sex or money or food or drinking. I think it's just kind of greed, that's the word I think of when I think of hedonism. And I also think of the scripture, what is it profit a man if he gain the whole world and he loses his soul?
Yeah, I think you're right. Greed is attached to that. It's part of that same drive.
Well, you kind of helped me hit the definition on the head. I mean, to me, hedonism is pleasure for the sake of pleasure. I mean, there are people out there who want change just for the sake of change, not to improve anybody's lot, but just because this is the way it's been and we need to do something different, whether it's better or not. But and that's hedonism. It's pleasure. It's just more pleasure. We need it. I need to do it because it's there. And I mean, everybody's hit the nail at a different angle, but it's all about. I like Julie's analogy best. It's like if you love chocolate ice cream and you have a freezer full of chocolate ice cream, you don't want to eat chocolate ice cream anymore because you got so much. If that was all you had to eat, you'd really hate it. I mean, you talk to anyone who's had a summer job in any kind of food service. By the end of that summer, you don't want to see that particular type of food anymore.
Yep, exactly right. Yeah. This is an interesting take on this. So John Piper, I don't agree with everything that John Piper writes, but this is an interesting take. So he uses the term Christian hedonism, the conviction that God's ultimate goal in the world, what brings him glory, and our deepest desire to be happy are one and the same, because God is most glorified in us when we're most satisfied in him. Not only is God the supreme source of satisfaction for the human soul, but God himself is glorified by our being satisfied in him. Therefore, our pursuit of joy in him is essential. Christian hedonism claims Christian life should be the pursuit of maximum joy in God. Joy both in quality and quantity. The fullness of joy and joy forevermore are found only in him. So it's an interesting concept there. One way of summarizing the Christian life is the pursuit of joy in God, and that God is all for that. as long as it is joy that's somehow connected to him. All right, a bit of a turn here by Warren. The church has a reputation of being anti-pleasure. Many characterize Christians in general the way H.L. Mencken Riley described Puritans, people with a haunting fear that someone, somewhere might be happy. In reality, the church has led the way in the art of enjoyment and pleasure. New Testament scholar Ben Witherington points out that it was the church, not Starbucks, that created coffee culture. Coffee was first invented by Ethiopian monks. The term cappuccino refers to the shade of brown used for the habits of the Capuchin monks of Italy. Coffee is born of extravagance, an extravagant God who formed an extravagant people, who formed a craft out of the pleasures of roasted beans and frothed milk. A culture formed by the gospel will honor good and right enjoyment, celebration, and sensuousness. Yes.
And beer too.
And beer too. Okay. Yeah.
It's a lot of brewing techniques that we use now, and they do a lot of styles that are still with us today.
I wonder how Craig knew that.
Years of research, years and years of research.
He's constantly tasting and seeing that the board is good.
That's what Franklin said.
But yeah, we were recently at the cloisters on the north side of Manhattan, where they've basically reproduced several monasteries from Europe and then filled it with medieval art. And I mean, the whole thing is just a testament to the early church's desire to create things that radiate with joy. I mean, beautiful artwork, sculptures, tapestries of many of them of unicorns dying brutal deaths. But just full of art, and the church was behind all of that. Okay, so just following up on this theme here, J.I. Packer, back in '93, article in Christianity Today called Pleasure Principles. How should Christians react to a culture that so set its eyes on pursuing pleasure? Merely to emphasize work rather than leisure, activity rather than rest, and austerity rather than delight is not good enough. This has been done, and the results of doing it are evident all around us. Such teaching turns some Christians into workaholics while leading others to live with a split mind, not relating their enjoyments to their devotions, but behaving as if their pleasures are their own business after work is over and have nothing to do with God. How many late night pizza poppers, Coke guzzlers, and sports watchers among God's people thank God for these relaxing delights? A positive theology of pleasure, so showing its proper place in a holy life, is what we need in life. Have you ever experienced Christianity as anti-pleasure, as Warren posed there at one point?
During this whole lesson, I've been thinking of something, and I don't know why I feel this way or exactly when it was instilled into me. I grew up in the Church of Christ in Akron, Ohio. And that congregation, and some of you may know what this means, some may not, was proudly known as the antis and not the liberals of the Church of Christ. And a lot of times and I still feel like this today, once in a while, with prayer requests and things. Like, I have a prayer request, but then other people have prayer requests that seem so much more dire, life-threatening. It's like, I don't really have any troubles compared to that. Or sometimes if I'm doing something pleasurable, or I can't even think of a good example. Instead of trying to seek out someone to help or some situation, I can be of service to someone, I feel guilty. And I mean, that's my own issue, but it's, I suspect, as probably Lot would tell us, it comes from something I learned as a child. So I don't necessarily have experienced Christianity as anti-pleasure, but just sometimes I feel guilty that I am having fun or relaxing or doing something that's not productive.
Okay, yeah. That strong work ethic and, yeah, good. Thank you. Alexa, quiet.
Oh. I wonder who that was.
She didn't even raise her hand.
Oh my God.
Okay.
I'm sure that if they were here, he could tell us, in what century, at what year, the Catholic Church decided to crack down on pleasure and why. But I mean, to me, the established church, so to speak, has always been anti-pleasure. For the general populace. If you were wealthy enough, you could buy, I can't remember the word. Dispensations, there it is.
Indulgences.
Yes, thank you. And you could have pleasure and pay God so that you wouldn't be punished for having. And I don't know what the root of that is. So maybe we can have Dale put a little paper out on that. Because he's really not doing much at all.
The day music died.
Yes.
Quote a good song. John?
I wonder if part of this might be rooted in our emphasis on individual souls. My soul, my fate, my potential to go to heaven or
Yes.
whatever, and overlooking the multiplier effect of being part of a people. We went to a concert yesterday. We saw the beauty of people sharing a passion, working together to create something beautiful and share it with other people. And I thought, surely God is in this place. We're meant to share these experiences and create this bigger outcome, as opposed to only perseverating on our own souls. That's just
That's good. Yeah.
2 cents.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. A few more slides here. Yet so much wars against these little moments of glory in our day. For me, anxiety and needling worries are always clanging in the background, robbing me of the ability to simply exhale. I have to learn to surrender, to give up my flimsy illusion of control and relax into beauty. As busy, practical, hurried, and distracted people, we develop habits of inattention, and we miss these tiny theophanies in our day. But if we were fully alive and whole, no pleasure would be too ordinary or commonplace to stir up adoration. I have to learn the habits of adoration intentionally, to get out of my head and stop to notice the colors in my daughter's eyes or the sound of rain on our back porch. Part of me, the taskmaster general in my brain, can feel guilty about the moments when I slow down to enjoy the beauty around me. Tea and an empty hour can feel frivolous or frittering. I feel guilty about not doing something more important with my time, like laundry or balancing the checkbook or meeting my neighbors, or working or volunteering or serving the poor. Those are, of course, important things to do and good, necessary ways to use time, but it takes strength to enjoy the world. So we've hit on this a bit, but just to state it again, what are some things that make it difficult for you to just really relax and enjoy, some of the good, appropriate things that God has for you in life? What makes that hard for you?
Julie and I have talked a lot about this. It's the Mary Martha complex. You want to sit at the feet of whoever or whatever or wherever you are, but somebody had to put it all together behind the scenes. So I personally suffer from, oh no, who's going to clean up this mess? And so I get up and start to clean up the mess while everybody else is enjoying it. So it's a dichotomy that I probably live out more often than I should.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, we should see that sort of continuum, and maybe sometimes we are on extremes of that, one side or the other of that continuum. What else? What makes it difficult or challenging for you to really enjoy some ordinary things during the course of the day?
Because they are ordinary. It's like, oh, yeah, there's, there's the cat, it's there. It's gonna be there. The concept that the ordinary things are gonna be there forever. And we gotta, once we finish all this stuff, then we can take care of that. That might be a better explanation of the fact that we think they're gonna be there forever.
That's good. And they're not. David.
I think for me, when I'm on the water, and this time of year is just spectacular. The park. After a couple of days, it went flat. I'm on the road show, and I'm trying to be in the moment. But back in my mind, I know that's something that I can do. So while I want to just relax and just stop and just look around, there's that nagging part of it that thinks, oh, I've got to get that, I've got this to do, I have to do this, or for this and that, so there's maybe distractions to get really still sometimes.
Yeah, that nagging to-do list, yeah. Okay, we're on the home stretch. We may not make all these slides here. Enjoyment requires discernment. It can be a gift to wrap up in a blanket and lose myself in a TV show, but we can also amuse ourselves to death. My pleasure in wine or tea or exercise is good in itself, but can become disordered. As we learn to practice enjoyment, we need to learn the craft of discernment, how to enjoy rightly, to have and read pleasure as well. Well, this is the last slide. Dostoevsky wrote that beauty will save the world. This might strike us as mere hyperbole, but as our culture increasingly rejects the idea and language of truth, the church's role as a harbinger of beauty is a powerful witness to the God of all beauty. Czeslaw Milosz wrote in his poem One More Day, though the good is weak, beauty is very strong. And when people cease to believe that there is only good, that there's good and evil, only beauty will call to them and save them, so that they still know how to say this is true and that is false. Being curators of beauty, pleasure, and delight is therefore an intrinsic part of our mission, a mission that recognizes the reality. The truth is beautiful. All right, we'll end with that. Thanks everybody for being here. See all of you online this morning for joining us.